What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast, episode 36 coming your way. My name's Meek. I always got my co-host Wu. Wu, what we got going on today, brother?
I'm sweating this Yankees Red Sox game right now. This kind of sucks. Keeps going back and forth.
Listen,
Obviously, need a Yankees dub.
you got nothing to worry about. Red Sox is going to find a way to blow it. You'll win the series. It's okay. We're in shambles over here, Red Sox
It's just
Nation.
these games are too important, so I can't. I will not say anything until these games are have played the full 9 innings because it's going back and forth right now. These games are massively important at this point in the season. Yeah, no, it's scary hours. Yankees need these bad.
I was going to say, as a good Yankees Red Sox series should go, it should be a
Right.
back and forth affair. But
This is definitely the most important series that these teams have had in a very long time.
do they play another series? I think they must, right?
I
They got
think
one
they
more.
do, and it's back in Boston, I want to say. I don't
Hmm.
remember. I'd have to look.
We'll see. We'll see what happens when if that matters or not. But welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast. Like I said, we're here to give you some good fantasy football content today. We actually have a banger of an episode that I'm excited to talk about.
Facts.
Just to get through the introduction, we've hit 1,970 plus plays across Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. That was actually about 100 plus plays, Woo, that from our last episode to this one, which is kind of
Wow.
insane.
Yeah.
Um, Make sure you're following us on all of our socials: Twitter at Fourth and Fantasy Pod, Instagram and TikTok at Fourth and Fantasy, YouTube at Fourth and Fantasy. Please make sure you give us a like, follow on all of our socials, and leave a comment because you may see yourself on the show. Unfortunately, you're not going to see yourself on the show today. Today, our quick question is going to be an update for the famous. It's starting to become famous. The
It has to
Bonnet
be.
Fantasy Football League. We had our draft this past Tuesday. It was always great to get all the guys together, talk football, and a lot of laughs
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff like that. But um, you know, there was a draft that was had, and some people like their teams, others don't. But I'm going to kick it to you. Why don't you tell us about your team?
So I'll say exactly what I said the night of the draft. I like my team a lot, and that's scary. Because I feel like I nailed that draft, and we'll talk about, nailing your draft later on this episode. But yes, I'm very happy with how it ended up. However, I feel like that's going to set me up for immense pain later on in
Mm.
the year.
What was
But
what was the point where you were like, I'm nailing this right now?
yeah, it was I'm not gonna lie. So at three, I had the third pick, took Gibbs. For a while, I was going back and forth between CeeDee Lamb and Gibbs. And then honestly, when we did that mock draft episode on Monday night that came out on Tuesday, and I started with running back at two, or no, I started with Chase, but this is what it was.
Yes.
It was going in between those middle rounds. It was like 2 through 5, and I was very running back heavy, and I was pretty happy with that. But I knew going into our draft how many running back keepers there were on the board already, as well as our league loves running backs early. So I ended up going with Gibbs at the 103 because I was already sitting on Bucky as a keeper in the 11th. So I was comfortable with having those two as my top dogs and then hammering wide receivers in the middle. So I ended up going Tyreek Hill in the second round, which I'm nervous about him. I won't lie, but I feel like if anybody could have the crazy upside that he does, like that was a spot to take him at the end of the second. Then following that up with Marvin Harrison and Xavier Worthy. Um, I feel really comfortable with those guys being my starting running backs. I mean, excuse me, starting wide receivers. And then when I got to the sixth round, Joe Burrow was just sliding and sliding, and I felt like I couldn't let him pass once more. So I ended up taking him, get a top, quarterback at the position, give myself a positional advantage.
Oh, absolutely.
Overall, I'm just really happy with how it ended up. I also got TJ Hawkinson, so I feel like I have one of the top guys at those onesie positions, which makes me very excited. My bench, it's interesting. I took some shots since it is a keeper league. Like Jalen Noel was a shot for a possible keeper next year. I took a shot on Keenan Allen. Maybe he's got some PPR value there.
Sure.
But when it comes to the starting lineup, definitely happy. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm projected the most points week one. I don't know if that means anything. Is there a belt for that?
I don't know. I think they call that the paper champ right there.
Yeah. No, I definitely, on paper, I feel like I'm the champ, but it's a long season ahead.
Absolutely. Taking a look at my team, I'm just my overall thoughts afterwards was I think this was kind of the worst draft that I'd ever had, and
Really?
I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like, the panicking of like the guys you were expecting to be there weren't, or I don't know what happened. But regardless, through the first 4 rounds, I felt like I was nailing the draft. I went back
I
to
thought
back
so too.
receivers with London and AJ Brown, and then I kind of had a feeling that Jalen Hurts could potentially fall my way because of how much we like to sit in on quarterbacks in this league. So he fell in my lap at the end of the 3rd round. Took him, you know what I mean, to stack with AJ Brown because why not?
Right.
And then Devon Achane was my keeper in round 4. But then it was right at the end of the 5th round where things just started to like really put myself in kind of a mental pretzel. Like, I think I panic took Joe Mixon, and then obviously later finding
That
out,
was a shocking pick.
yeah, I honestly, I was not up to date on Joe Mixon, and realizing that he could potentially miss, like he could go on the pup to start the season. I didn't realize that was how bad his foot injury was, or his ankle injury, whatever one it was. And then to follow it up with Jalen Waddle, which I like because I think Jalen Waddle, someone who we talked about as a potential value in our value series, but the fact that I have Waddle comboed with Achan, like I'm kind of pigeonholing myself in the Miami offense, and really on
Yeah.
Tua. Like if Tua goes down, like Achan takes a huge dip, and so does Waddle, and then that
Right.
hurts my team. And then later on down the road, I didn't hate the pick of ETN in round 7. There really wasn't a lot of names that I liked. Obviously J.K. Dobbins was one that you ended up taking later on in the 8th round, but I thought the end of the 7th was a little too early.
Sure.
And then this was like the biggest blunder that like makes me upset was I took Jordan Addison in the 8th round. Obviously, he's going to have the first 3 games, 3 game suspension. But that was my opportunity right there to take Tyler Warren because he went literally in that round, and that's
Right.
always been the guy who I've kind of planted my flag on, and not having the chance to take him right there, and taking someone like Addison who I don't get in the first 3 weeks was kind of like felt like a boneheaded decision. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just beating myself up too much about the draft and things like that. But we all know that you don't win your league at the draft. You can certainly lose it. And I'm hoping I'm not doing that, and just going to stay active during the league, make some trades, work the waiver wire, and all that stuff, and hopefully we can repeat as back to back champs. So we'll
That's
have
all it
to
is, man.
we'll
As
have
long
to
as you
see.
stay active during the year, you'll be all right.
Actually, Woo, going back to the draft because I know you had a big gripe about
Oh my
something.
God. I
Would
you
you like to
you
Would you like to go first and tell the people what you were
see,
upset about?
I had forgotten all about this and now
Well,
my
I'm ready for
temperature
you.
just rose. So, listen, if I'm in the minority here, whatever, but I mean, okay, so in our draft, you got 2 minutes to pick, and we hold people accountable to that. We have a designated person who keeps track of the time. And normally it's never really an issue. Sometimes maybe it gets kind of close, but at the end of the day, it's never really an issue. So I forget what round it was, but our good friend Malik here was on the clock and he was picking 12th.
I'll tell you
And
exactly when it was. It was the back-to-back pick of Joe Mixon, Jalen Waddle.
okay, so Meek's on the clock. It is the fifth round. He's got the 512 and the 601. So, yes, Malik has back-to-back picks. However, in my opinion, that first pick you get 2 minutes. And then once that 2 minutes is up, then your 2 minutes starts for the next pick. However, apparently you just get 4 minutes to make two picks. My thing is if you watch the NFL draft or any draft for that matter, and teams have back-to-back picks, you don't get an extended time to make two picks. You get the certain time to make one pick, and you get that second amount of time to make that second pick. That was my argument. At the end of the day, not the end of the world because again, it's fantasy football. Who cares?
Oh yeah.
But I mean, that just if we're going off of technicalities, that was just me. That was just me. And of course, I got to get under the skin of the former champion. Like that's just something you have to do.
You got to try.
And it might have worked. Maybe I rattled them because
Maybe you did. I
you
took a
weren't
bad
happy
pick.
with your draft. So, but yeah, that was my thing. Maybe it's a little extra, but I rest my case.
So allow me to counter your argument. So I was curious, and so I went to the place where I felt like I could get the most clear, concise answer as quickly as possible. So I went to ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT in the NFL, because your whole thing was in the NFL draft, if you have back to back picks and you lose the first time, you should lose that pick. So my question was to ChatGPT in the NFL draft, if a team had back to back picks and the time expired for their first pick, what would happen? ChatGPT says, here's how it would work. If the clock expires, the team does not lose the pick. Instead, the next team or teams in line are allowed to submit their selection immediately. As soon as the team whose time expired turned in a card, their pick is locked in. But if other teams get their picks in first, they could, quote, jump them in order. So, an example, suppose Team A has pick 10 and pick 11. If their clock runs out at pick 10 with the team with pick 11, also Team A still technically has that pick too. But any team scheduled for pick 12 and beyond could rush their card in before Team A submits pick 10. So in practice, Team A could leapfrog or could get leapfrogged at pick 10, but still immediately make pick 11 once they had the card in hand. Because this actually happened in the 2020 or 2003 NFL draft with Minnesota missed their window at pick 7. So then Jacksonville and Carolina rushed to get their picks in before Minnesota submitted, and then Minnesota ended up picking at pick 9 when they were originally pick 7. So, in summary, if a team had back to back picks and the first one expired, they could still make both picks, but other teams could potentially sneak in between if they were fast turning in their card.
So my
So,
counter to the counter is I don't think you should have forfeited the pick. I just think if we were drafting online and not in person like we were with the board and you inputting the picks on Sleeper,
mm,
if your 2 minutes runs up and we're drafting online, it auto picks for you. So I think it should have just been an auto
it should have
draft
been an
pick.
auto pick.
Correct. That was
So,
my thing. But
well,
again, who cares?
maybe we'll have to put in a clause for next year or a
Maybe
change of rules, But
the Meek clause.
I'm just saying, if you were the champ, you probably wouldn't. You'd like to have that 4 minutes, wouldn't you?
Listen, like I said, maybe
I'm
I was
just
just trying to get under the skin
I'm just
of the former
saying.
champion.
So, uh, so I know that was a long, quick question, ladies and gentlemen. But again, if you're interested, wanted to see the draft board or anything like that, please let us know, and maybe we will post that on our socials later on down the road. Moving into around the NFL. Got a lot of news, some quick ones and some longer ones. First one, which I put this one at the top because I think this one is a big deal. Colts named Daniel Jones as the Week 1 starter. I don't have the exact article for this, but I know Shane Steichen came out. I want to say it was the day after our draft on
I
Wednesday,
think you're right.
when he came out and said that Daniel Jones is the Week 1 starter going in. I've been a big proponent of saying, as someone who's been a Tyler Warren guy, best case scenario is for Tyler Warren is if Daniel Jones is the starter. This is best case scenario. If you're an Anthony Richardson guy, Anthony Richardson manager, like this thing
Bad.
is bad. Like
Bad.
you cut Anthony Richardson if you're like a dynasty manager of him?
See, I would say hold off on that because you have to take in the whole picture. He is younger than rookie quarterbacks that are like he's younger than Shador Sanders. So he's been
That's
in the
nuts.
league. He got drafted what, 2023?
Yes.
So he is younger than rookie quarterbacks who just got drafted this year. So if there is a team or the Colts, if there is some team in the NFL that still thinks that there's something there because the physical attributes are insane for a quarterback. If any team is willing to take this on as a project, like I would say hold off on just dropping. I think that's too harsh, like too much of a harsh reaction. Yes, it sucks for right now, but I still think there could be an opportunity for some sort of team um, to take Anthony Richardson on his project due to how young he is. And it was clear, like in college, like he just didn't play enough games. There wasn't enough reps. Obviously, the upside, everybody saw the upside, and I think he was just drafted off of that. And it's clear that it's important for these college guys to play earlier today that I think applies here. Bill Parcells had a rule when he was drafting quarterbacks. They had to be they had to have a college degree. B had to be a 3-year starter in college. They had to play, I forget how many games it was, but it was however many games Bill Parcells thinks they should have played. they had to start in like 80% of those games. So like all of these rules were just basically like this guy has enough college reps in order to, make a transfer into the NFL. And I just think Richardson was just drafted based off of the hype and, the pro day clips and, all of those things. I think he was set up for failure in that because of how highly he was drafted with the low amount of reps and games played in
Yeah.
college.
I think he was I think everyone is chasing the Josh Allen like dream of, Josh Allen was, drafted out of Wyoming, started off with a statistical nightmare. I think he had a horrible completion percentage. And then, the year after, I don't know if it was his second year in the league or his third year in the league where he like really turned it around and became basically the, elite quarterback that we know of him now. And that's why people like Brian Dable have a head coaching job and, things like that. But I wanted to just give the people just some you know statistics and some like advanced metrics about Anthony Richardson. So in 2024 in 11 games Richardson completed only 47.7% of his passes for 1,800 yards and 8 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. If you go into the metrics, sorry, he had a 47.7 completion rate. It was the worst for a qualified passer since Tim Tebow in 2011. He posted a league worst 54.9% on target rate in 2024, which is more than 12 percentage points behind the next lowest QB. Like, sometimes you want to take on a project and it's just too much for you to take on. And I think in this situation with, Anthony Richardson, I think there wasn't really anyone who could fix him into becoming a high level NFL quarterback. Like they see the attributes and things like, oh, like I could totally fix this. And maybe some people can, but the majority can't. I was looking at, or I was going through like TikTok one day, and it's just a normal podcast of I can't remember the podcast because if not, I would give them a shout out, but you could tell that these guys were, intelligent, either high school or college football coaches, and they're talking about the play where Anthony Richardson got hurt in the preseason game and
Mm,
broke his pinky, and the guy in obviously you and I we talked about it and we were like, wow, like his offensive line is getting him killed. And the guy was like, no, like that is all on Anthony Richardson. That's basic level QB protection stuff on being able to see the front that you have, call the protection, and then just know where your pressure is coming from. And you're not able to dissect that. Like he was basically saying like that's, high school level protection stuff in an offense for you to realize, and he's not picking up on that. Like that's scary.
right.
So I don't know. I'm just throwing out a bunch of, statistics and things like that. Who knows? Maybe he goes somewhere and just does an absolute turnaround, and everything I say is a complete moot point. But it's definitely things to consider for him and his future.
Maybe if JJ McCarthy doesn't work out, Minnesota takes a flyer.
Yeah,
Like if anybody's gonna fix him,
that or the other place or I saw on Twitter was, could you imagine if he goes to L.A. and plays with
the
McVay?
Rams.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that that could be
that'd be
scary.
scary hours.
Yeah. So hopefully there are brighter days for Anthony Richardson, but we'll see.
I'm rooting for him. I just think he got set up for failure.
Yeah. Speaking of the Rams, Matthew Stafford said he is doing quote everything under the sun to address his back issues, and he's actually back at practice. So this article comes from Kevin Patra from NFL.com. Matthew Stafford's aching back is on the mend as the 2025 regular season approaches. 37-year-old Los Angeles Rams quarterback took part in practice sessions throughout this week. On Thursday, he said he's doing, quote, everything under the sun, it feels like, to be ready for the upcoming season when the Rams kick off on September 7th against the Texans. Good to hear, Wu, that he's back at practice. Do you think this back issue is going to be something that lingers through the 2025 season?
Like probably because back stuff is scary, especially the for Matthew Stafford for where he's at in his career, especially with the position he plays. I believe I saw a quote that he said like he felt pretty good and better than what he was expecting. So it sounds like if he didn't feel good, he would not be practicing right now. So I think
Mm.
that's a good sign. Definitely something that can linger, especially if you get hit the wrong way. So I mean, it's going to be something we have to monitor all year probably. And it's Devontae Adams gonna have to play with Jimmy G when that's
Yeah,
the reason why he wants
he's
to get
gonna
out of
hate it.
Vegas. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely something you got to pay attention to. I don't know. Backs can be back and neck. It's real scary
Yeah.
stuff. Like
Oh yeah.
anything, just if you fall the wrong way, even if it's not even a hard hit, like something could go wrong there.
Right. Yeah, I'm hoping that he's able to kind of keep himself together for the year because, I think a lot of people have stuff riding on. Like if you took Puka Nakua in your drafts or Devontae Adams, like you said, like, you know, a lot of people are leaning on and hoping that Matthew Stafford can provide, elite level fantasy production for them. So we'll see. Uh, Two quick trades we actually had yesterday of some young wide receivers. So the first one, Chiefs trade Sky Moore for and a 2027 seventh round pick to the 49ers for a 2027 sixth round draft choice. And then also the Broncos have traded wide receiver Devon Vele to the Saints in exchange for a 2026 fourth round pick and a 2027 seventh round pick. Of these two names, which one do you think is probably the most important for fantasy?
Probably Sky Moore, just because the offense looks a lot better than the Saints offense does. And I think I think the fact that the 49ers are willing to make a move, even though like it's not like a big splash play, is really only for a seventh or no, a sixth round pick. So it's not like they, dropped a bag for this guy, but I think it tells you a little bit about maybe the Ayuk situation and something that's going on there. Maybe whether he plays for them or not, like maybe it's going to be a little bit longer than what they were anticipating. It just looks like they're trying to give Brock Purdy some options. As of right now, it's just Pearsall. Isn't Juwan Jennings dealing with something right now as well?
He's hurt in a contract issue. I was just about
Exactly.
to say I think this is totally out of necessity. So
Yeah.
just to break down. So Ayuk is, the ACL injury. We think he's not going to come until like midway through the year. Jennings we said is injured and also dealing with a ham or calf issue, one of the two. Jacob Cowing's hurt with a calf issue. Jordan Watkins just went on the IR, and then they just handed out the suspension for Demarcus Robinson. So if you take all of those names out, there's blast from the past Russell Gage, Robbie Chosen is on this roster.
Oh my
Um,
God, he still plays football?
apparently he does. So like I almost want to say Sky Moore is needed in this offense. Like I like maybe the Jennings thing gets figured out and it is what it is, but he plays the slot. They need someone on the opposite side of the field and Sky Moore is probably that guy that they're going to lean on. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little biased. I just picked him up in our dynasty league. So he's sitting on my roster right now, but I think he might be kind of needed in this 49ers offense.
And it's a good offense to be a part of. I think Shanahan could revive him if there's anything to be had there. There was definitely a lot of hype for him when he was in Kansas City, so maybe there's still something there.
Right. And for both these guys, I know we didn't touch on Vele. I just feel like
I don't think that one matters.
anyone on the Saints this year really is if your name isn't Alvin Kamara, you're pretty much irrelevant. But if you're someone who's in need of it, I would check your dynasty waiver wires for both of these guys. And if you can acquire both of them, good move. If you can, if they're not, then it is what it is. But I would definitely go check your waiver wire right now. Uh,
100%.
Oh, the next one. This one's a good one. Aaron Glenn wants to utilize Jets, quote, three good running backs, not open to trading Brees Hall. So this comes again from Kevin Patra from NFL.com. Uh, he starts it off. Aaron Glenn gets the game. The first year New York Jets coach understands that anytime he compliments running backs Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis, it could invite speculation that the Jets are looking to trade Brees Hall. This dynamic became evident in the spring when Glenn remarks about the backfield quickly led to speculation about Hall's future. On Tuesday, Glenn was asked about Allen's size and what it brings to the offense. He finished his response by steering the conversation away from those Hall trade rumors. Quote, we have like three good running backs. And I keep saying that, Glenn said. Listen, they all have different skill sets that they are going to utilize. And does that mean that I'm trading? it, and that does not mean that I'm trading Brees, okay? Does not. So I'm going to say that right now. I just like having three good guys. Hell, I wish I had more, but we don't. Um, Woo,
Great quote.
the man saying that he's not getting rid of him, but do you believe that?
I do because I think this goes back to the conversation we had. I believe it was last episode as well. I think the writing's on the wall that they're not going to sign Brees to another extension after this season. I understand that Glenn likes having a committee. He was a part of one, in Detroit with Gibbs and Montgomery. Definitely a much different scenario here with the Jets in terms of talent with Brees and Braylon Allen. However, I do like Braylon Allen. Um, I wasn't expecting Brees to be traded this season. I think it could be. I don't know if the NFL does this, but like in the NBA, like a sign and trade, like they give Brees a
Mm,
contract and then trade him. I
yep.
think that is very much a possibility. I refuse to believe that they just let him walk for nothing. There's way too much value there for Brees.
That was my the thing I was just about to say though is like if they're positive that they're not going to have Brees next year, why wouldn't you trade him by like the I'm not saying like by the start of this year to trade him, but like come the trade deadline,
That's
depending
fair.
on what situation you are. If you know, I'm just hypothetically saying, like, if the Jets were in a position where they could fight for a playoff spot and you get Brees to buy in, like maybe you ride the year out, but if maybe they're out of it and, there's no future in sight of signing him, then you get what you can from, a caliber of Brees and just see what you can get.
Yeah, that's why I think it's probably going to be a sign and trade kind of thing if that is a thing in the NFL because. Um, Like like you said, like, there's no way they just let him walk for free. I
Mm,
think they want to use him for the rest of the year. But like with the contract thing, like somebody like whoever they trade him to, like if it was going to be right now, would have to be willing to give him a deal. And I think they would probably want to see what Brees looks like this year because he's had ACL injuries in the past. And they want to see what kind of juice he's got. Obviously, last year was a little bit of a disappointment. He was RB 17 on the year, I think, for fantasy.
I think you're
Um,
right.
and that was a big time year where he was being taken in the first, second round. So, yeah, I mean, I think if anything, if Brees is to leave, it's going to be this offseason in some sort of sign and trade kind of thing.
Yeah. Unfortunate, but that's kind of the way the NFL works. Last piece of news we have is wide receiver Chris Godwin will be activated off the pup list ahead of the 2025 season. This comes from Coach Todd Bowles, who told the reporters. When I was reading this, Woo, I don't have this one up, but basically what was being said by Todd Bowles is that, yes, he's going off the but this doesn't mean he's playing anytime soon. Like this is just kind of their protocol within, the Tampa Bay organization of getting a player off the pup and then, ramping them, back to get ready for play. So it doesn't seem like he's definitely doesn't seem like he's going to be ready for week one, but I don't know if this means he's going to be ready sooner than you and I both expected.
I think I'm going to stick to my week 4 timeline. I've been on this for a good amount of time now, especially when, it first came out that he was still, working on his recovery, but they were expecting him to be back week 1 and then they put him on the pup and all this different stuff. I'm going to stick to my week 4 timeline. Like because of my argument the last time we talked about this, you had the luxury of giving him time to come back because you just took Egbuka in the first round.
Hmm.
If they don't do that move, then I think that he comes back sooner because they need him, especially with McMillan dealing with injuries now. And I think he's out indefinitely as well. So now that you
Yeah,
have the luxury to let Chris Godwin fully recover, because that injury was not, it definitely was not something that you want to deal with. It was a pretty gruesome one. So I think they're going to allow him to give him time. They gave him the contract. They know they want him to be around, and Chris Godwin knows that as well. So I think they're just going to let him take his time. I'm sticking to that week 4 timeline.
yeah. Doesn't this just feel like Emeka Ibuka is going to smash this year in
Yep, and I
fantasy?
was trying to do everything in my power to get him on Tuesday night, and I forget what round he went in. It was a little bit earlier than I was willing to take him, but I think it was still a good pick.
I'll
I ended
tell
up
you
taking
right
Chris
now.
Godwin at the end because of, I think there's still going to be value for him late in the year. But
He
yeah,
went
I,
he
I
went
was trying to.
round 7 in our draft.
Yeah, I was probably looking like 8 or 9. I
Yep.
forget who I took in. Who did I take in round 7? Was that
You took
Hawkinson?
Hawk, yeah. Or no,
But
yeah.
Egbuka got taken before, right?
He got taken before, and then the in the round before was 6. You took
Yeah,
Burrow. You
Yeah, I'm
take
not
Burrow
taking
there.
Ibuka before Burrow.
No, no, no.
Yeah,
You
it just
absolutely
didn't
don't.
work out, and it is what it is.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into our main topic of the show. Like I said, I feel like this one is a banger, especially with people in fantasy drafts coming up. This is we're recording on August 21st, and it feels like either this weekend coming up and next weekend you're going to see a whole bunch of fantasy drafts go down. I know I have like two two or maybe even three fantasy drafts in the next 2 weeks. So
Oh wow.
it's that time of year. You know what I mean?
I'm
Um,
actually all done with my redrafts. I'm kind of sad.
wow, you're all done. You know what? You know what
Yeah,
you should get into is if I'm you, I get
best
into
ball.
either a best ball or the Megalo Bowl that the fantasy
Mm,
footballers do, because that's a good time. I
good
do
idea.
enjoy doing that one.
Right.
But anyways, these are top 10 redraft tips that we have for you. These are some tips and tricks that we use for the redraft season to make the most competitive team that we can. You don't feel like you have to follow these tips to a T. I'm not saying that these are stone cold, like you follow every single one of these, you're going to win a championship every year. That's not what we're here to do. This is just a framework kind of for your fantasy season. We're giving you different perspective on things that maybe you weren't considering, before, and now you're tuning into this podcast, and we're trying to get you to look at fantasy football from a different lens. Obviously you can follow some of these, and if there are ones that you love that maybe we didn't mention, leave us a comment and on the YouTube video, or give us a DM on TikTok or Instagram and tell us what it is, because maybe it might be helpful for us. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we're all for trying to teach the community about fantasy football and improving, but I'm a lifelong learner. You know what I mean? I'm always willing to
Oh
take
yeah.
in new strategies, new ideas, and things like that, because I feel like that's how you kind of learn the best. You know what I mean? So we have
Exactly.
10 tips. Woo has five. I have five. We're just going to alternate back and forth. But Woo, I'm going to give you the floor. Go ahead with tip number
Let's go.
one.
Yeah, tip number one's going to be know your league. I think this is very important. First, definitely want to understand the league format and the settings, whether it's PPR, half PPR. How does that affect the players that you're taking? For example, I play in pretty much all full PPR leagues. So if I'm in a position where, I think it's around the 10th, 11th pick. Let's say Derrick Henry's sitting there right on the board, and he would be the one you should be taking ADP wise. But because you're in a full PPR league, does that mean Devon Achane is someone you should be taking ahead of him due to the receiving upside that Derrick Henry just doesn't have? Yes, Derrick Henry is an animal when it comes to running the ball, but he just doesn't have that level of or that part of his game, that Achane does, and that's a missed opportunity when it comes to fantasy points in a full PPR league. Um, Also, like I know for our Bonnet League, for years and years, running backs went super, super early, and you had to be wary of that because if you waited on running back, you were probably getting a whole lot of nothing towards the end, and it was by like round four. So
Mm,
that's something you have to take into that draft and be a part of your strategy and your plan. Like, all right, if I know running backs are going to go early, like I can't pass on too many because when it comes my time to where I want to start taking running backs, there's not going to be names that I like, and I'm going to be lacking at that position for the whole year. Um, Another one, for our league again, quarterbacks typically drop. I got Joe Burrow in the sixth, this past week. In other leagues, I could see him going in the fourth or fifth round, depending. So that's something you have to pay attention to as well. Like, if I know quarterbacks are going to are going to drop in the draft, I can take advantage of that. And even if there is a name up there high on the list that I like, maybe he drops a round or two because you know that the rest of your league isn't worried about taking a quarterback in the second or third round. Actually, this year was an outlier for us. I think quarterbacks went pretty early
yes.
compared to recent years. But there's been plenty of times where a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson is dropping to the third or fourth round, where that just typically doesn't happen, especially with their ADP. So understanding your league settings and just how your league is set up with the scoring and the format and how many roster spots you have, and B, just knowing the people that are in your league. How are these people drafting? What have you seen from years past? Obviously, these things can always change on a year-to-year basis, but if you have a good idea of how your other league mates draft, you can take advantage of that with your own strategy. If you get to a position where you're in a draft and it's your turn to pick, and there's a few names that you like. If one of them, if for example, is a quarterback and you think you can get him a round or two later, then you can take advantage of that and go another position and continue to stack that part of your roster.
Right. I love the part that you mentioned about knowing your league and your league mates because you know, especially this bonnet league, we have people who love to take tight ends. Some people take three, two, three, four tight ends. So,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're someone who is late on the tight end party, like, or knowing your league, like,
Right.
just know that they might scoop them up on you.
Exactly.
Um, so I'm gonna go next. My tip I have for you, I call this figure out if you're a QB streamer or a tight end streamer. So in my eyes, in order to have a great team, you cannot have an elite quarterback and an elite tight end. You can have a good tight end or a good quarterback, but you can't have both elites because if you take an elite QB and an elite tight end, you sacrifice so much running back and wide receiver depth on your team. So, the example that I give is let's just say hypothetically, you're sitting at the 111, 112, and you take Brock Bowers, an elite tight end. It's an awesome start. Absolutely. If you were to follow that up with Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen as a quarterback, that's great. You have a great quarterback, you have a great tight end. However, you have now sacrificed both those positions for running back and wide receiver depth. So just taking the from the lens of our bonnet league, if you were to take those two players at round one, round two, the players you give up are Derrick Henry, Drake London, AJ Brown, Lad McConkey, potentially Josh Jacobs. Like those are, in my eyes, cornerstone players that you need in order to set yourself up for a great year. But if you do that, then you leave yourself open to then okay, round three comes your way. Your your running back one is like potentially Kenneth Walker or Brees Hall, which good players, but probably not great wide running back ones for your team. And then you decide to go running back that round. Round four comes around, and you're looking at people like DK Metcalf and Devontae Adams and DJ Moore as your wide receiver one. So that it just puts you in such a bad situation, and I highly advise not doing that. You can take one of them, and that's totally fine. But if you do that, then you need to make sure that you're streaming the position or taking it very, very late. And the reason why I say streamer is because if you're taking that position late, you're better off streaming and checking your waiver wire every week as opposed to taking that player late and locking them into your lineup for the year. And another prime example of this. So, just going back to the bonnet draft because I just have the board up. I was
Right.
someone who took Jalen Hurts in the third round, so I already kind of told myself that I'm, going to be streaming the position of tight end. Obviously I wanted someone like Tyler Warren because I felt like he was a late round guy who could be, an every week starter for my lineup. But as the names go on, like people like Tucker Kraft or Dalton Kincaid or Jake Ferguson, you cannot lock these players into your lineup, and you have to be flexible and check the waiver wire each week because of just the quality or caliber of player that they are.
Right. Yeah, and I love this tip. I think the only exception is in 10-man leagues. I think it's
Oh
very
yeah.
important to have one of those top positions for a tight end and quarterback just because there's less picks that other teams can make. But in 12-man leagues for sure. I kind of teetered with this on Tuesday with going Burrow and Hawkinson back to back, but I was very comfortable with the wide receiver running backs I had made prior to that, to
Yeah.
where when I got to the sixth and seventh round, I thought that was a good spot for it. But definitely like
Right.
if you're going first round Brock Bowers and then Josh Allen second round, like I think you're screwing yourself
Yeah.
for sure.
But and just in your case too, though, you had the added benefit of Bucky Irving in the 11th round. You
Right.
know what I mean? Because if you
Exactly.
look at the board and you just ignore Bucky Irving as in the 11th round as
Yeah,
your
no, I'm
keeper,
down bad.
your second running back is J.K. Dobbins. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that's how it can mess you up even going that late. Back to back quarterback tight end. But Woo, I'm gonna kick it to you for tip number three. Go ahead.
Yeah, this one's going to be, not being scared of, or not sticking so hard to, ADP. If you like a guy and you're not sure he's going to make it back to you, especially if you're towards the end of each round, whether that be the 101 through the 103 or the 10th through 12th pick. Don't be afraid to take this player before their ADP if you really like them.
God, I should
I'm trying
have
to think.
followed this in
Yeah,
our draft.
right. Yeah. Like prime example for Malik, you mentioned it earlier, going Jordan Addison when all summer it's been Tyler Warren at that exact spot.
Hmm.
And sometimes, it's a mistake that happens and it's okay. But if it continues throughout a draft, you can kind of screw yourself again. I'm thinking of a situation for myself, like we were talking about Igbuka. Yes, I wanted him in that, to leave that draft with him. But, there are situations where it just may be too early. I think the sixth round was too early for him, and there's other better names on the board like a Joe Burrow. But if like I said, if you're towards the end of a round and you have 20 picks in between your next pick, like for example, there was some situations in mock drafts where I was taking Caleb Johnson probably a round early because I wanted to make sure he was on my team, and because I'm was at the third draft spot, there was probably no chance that he was getting back to me. And I believe I did that in the Bonnet League as well. I have to look at the draft board.
Taking
Or no,
Caleb
I'm thinking of
Johnson.
another draft. I didn't take Caleb Johnson. I'm
I
thinking
was
of
just
another
say I
draft, but
think Terrell took him at towards right before my pick.
yeah, but if there's a name that you really like and you want to leave your every single draft with him, and it's not like a crazy reach, I think it's very important to leave the draft with the guys that you like because there's a reason that you like that you like that player, whether it be the situation or how many opportunities they're going to get. So just don't be afraid of having to scroll down a little bit on that ADP list. It's not going to kill you. And again, if you want a guy, you should go out and get him.
Absolutely. That last part that you just said about like not being afraid to scroll down the list, like don't obviously like if you're someone who drafts on Sleeper and we love using Sleeper, ever since we've kind of made the move to ESPN. And the great thing that Sleeper does is kind of gives you that projected of like, next time your picks around, these are the players who are projected to be in the area. you know don't pigeonhole yourself to that. Like that's just a framework. If there's a guy that you like that, you believe in, like you go and you get that guy, you know what I mean? And obviously it's better said than done,
100%.
as someone who didn't do that. But, at the end of the day, like if you're not willing to, take that chance, someone is going to, and it may work out for them. So
And I'm not gonna lie, in the moment, it is tough to do. It's not something that's easy, especially if you do have to scroll down a little bit. You kind of think like, oh, well, there's a reason why he's down towards the bottom of that list. But again, ADP stands for average draft position. It is the average of where
average.
they're being drafted. So it's not set in stone that they should be going in the seventh round. If you want to take them at the end of the fifth or at the beginning of the sixth, like that's okay.
Absolutely. Tip number 4, I'm up. This one I'm going to call the power of the stack. Stacking is great in fantasy football, and if you don't know what stacking is, I'll explain it to you. But you definitely want to utilize this tactic, in your draft. So essentially, what stacking is if you have either or it can be a running back, wide receiver, tight end, that you stack on the same team as the quarterback. So a prime example of what I have, in the draft, I talked about how I drafted AJ Brown in the second round, and then the third round, the opportunity to take Jalen Hurts in the third was great, and so the reason why you want to stack in fantasy football is because there's such a positive correlation in scoring. When a quarterback throws a touchdown to either a wide receiver or tight end that you're stacking, you double dip. So, the quarterback gets 4 points for a passing touchdown if you play in a 4 point, passing touchdown league, or a 6 point. So, the quarterback gets 4 points, but then also that wide receiver, tight end, running back gets a point for the catch and the yards and a touchdown. So like you get to, really kind of like it's like having a multiplier on your team, which is insane. So like, the best example in 2023, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs combined for 33% of Buffalo's fantasy points when they started together. 33 points is insane. Like, of just in total fantasy points of an NFL team. on top of it, it could be the difference between, you winning a week and losing a week. Stacks increase your weekly upside in shootouts. And, data from 2019 to 2022 shows that top 10 QB wide receiver stacks actually average 3.2 more points per game together compared to when they're separated. So that's just some data right there that just is in favor of stacking. But the one thing I do want to say is do not sacrifice draft position or potential picks uh for having that stack. Like just you have to let it kind of come to you. Like uh prime example, like Josh Matera in our league, took CD Lamb in the first round. Great pick. And then he follows it up by taking Dak in round 9. He could have, round 9's still pretty late, and he's able to fill some holes, but it feels as though he probably could have waited even a couple of more rounds to take Dak Prescott and either bolster the running back depth that he had or the wide receiver depth that he had, to and then had that stack on top of it all. So, um,
Yeah, exactly. And I think going back to the last one we were just talking about with the ADP not being scared of it. When it comes to a stack, I think you need to be cautious of ADP, like you said. For example, in this past draft, I took Marvin Harrison in the third round. So as soon as I took him, Kyler Murray immediately went to mind. I'm like, all right, I'm leaving this draft with Kyler Murray. But it got to a point where Joe Burrow kept slipping and slipping out, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to take Kyler Murray if Joe Burrow's still here on the board. That's a no brainer. As much as I like Kyler Murray this year, that would just be silly to do that. Again, like you said, it's something that has to happen. You can't force a stack. I wanted to, like I said, I've had my 2 redraft leagues or drafts already. In both, I wanted to leave with a stack. It just didn't work out that way. But it's not something that you should force because it will ruin the rest of your draft.
right. So tip number 5, we'll go ahead. You are up.
Yeah, this one's kind of a quick one, but I think it's important. Don't worry about bye weeks, like at all. If you're making when you were making your picks, you should not even be looking at, your bye weeks. If you like these players and they all have a week 8 bye, who cares? You chalk up week 8, it's a loss, whatever. And maybe if you have some streaming options, maybe you get lucky and you still get a win. But do not be drafting based off of bye weeks. There's no need to, take players to diversify how many bye weeks you have. For example, like this year, I'm like week 8 is a prime one for me. I'm probably gonna lose that week. I'm pretty sure Achan and like 2 other guys have a week 8 bye, but I'm not gonna sit there and like take other guys just because of a bye week. If I
One
like a
week.
player, I'm gonna take them. Yeah, exactly. It's 1 week. If it is those top players who are going to be high, producers for your teams and probably win you weeks, don't pass up on a guy just so you can, have only one guy on by 1 week and then have another one the next week. If anything, that's going to be more of a pain. And to be honest, if you have more of the same bye week, that might actually work out well for you. You just chalk up that week as a loss, and you don't have to worry about the other week. So just again, it's a quick one, but just don't be so focused on bye weeks. I can't remember the last time I looked at a bye week. I usually find out that week that person's on bye, and I figure it out from there. But it just shouldn't be something that you're bringing into your draft plan.
I think the only time I consider bye weeks is if I'm taking 2 quarterbacks, and the only reason
Okay.
why is like if you're taking a second quarterback, you don't want to take that quarterback to
Valid.
then have the same bye week as your starter or whoever you're going to interchange with, because then it just doesn't make sense taking that
Right.
guy. I
Yeah.
guess the same could be said with a tight end too, because that's a onesie position where that works. But like I agree with you, I don't that's not something that I'm considering when drafting really.
Yeah.
So
And I'm personally not somebody who takes 2 quarterbacks. So when it comes to a draft, I really just don't think about it at all.
yeah. My next one, tip number 6 we have, this one is stay active and don't give up. Listen, the number of times that, I've seen a team who has started 1-3 or 0-4 and they end up making the playoffs is ridiculous. Obviously you don't want to be in that position, but it just goes to show that it's never over. If your team starts 1-3 or 0-4, and there's so many people who they just get, pounded for the first month of the season, and they're just like, you know what, click out, and then they never check their team again.
Yeah, see you next year.
There are going to be so many people who do that, and if you don't and you stay, focused and dedicated to it, I promise you, you will turn it around and you'll make the playoffs. And really, your goal should not be to be the number one team or even the number two team. To, your goal is just to make the playoffs. Like, simple as that. How can I go in to make the playoffs? And then after that, it's anybody's chance. Like, I've seen so many times, teams that have gone like, 7-7, or 6-8, and they make the playoffs, and then they just literally go on a meteoric rise and they win the championship. Doesn't matter. All your goal is to just make the league, or I'm sorry, make the playoffs, and fight from there. You know what I mean? So the way you do that is you're staying top of your waiver wires, you're looking for trades, and you just keep fighting week in and week out. And you do that, I promise you, good things will come your way.
And I think this is on the flip side too. If you start 4-0, don't hang the banner yet.
Yeah,
I've started 4-0
Josh
and not
Matera,
made the
don't hang the
playoffs.
banner, right?
Yeah, no, so it goes both ways. You should be playing the season out in full, no matter what. Anything can happen, whether it's good or bad. So you need to be paying attention all season.
Yeah, absolutely. Woo, you were up. I don't have my tab up. I think this is pick number or tip number
7.
7. Yep, go
Yep.
ahead. You tip number 7.
This one, again, kind of a quick one, but handcuff your top running back. This is massively important in redraft. I can think of a couple prime examples. Bijan, if you draft Bijan, you should be leaving every single draft that you have Bijan with Tyler Algier. One that kind of didn't really work out for me, I took Jahmyr Gibbs. Montgomery's was going a little too high, and for me to want to handcuff, I think he's like a 5th round pick. I'm not willing to do that. I'm talking like in a Bijan case where Tyler Algier is going at the end of the draft, you should be leaving every single draft with Tyler Algier. I think there's an argument for Derrick Henry. If you have Derrick Henry, you should be taking Keaton Mitchell. If you have Christian McCaffrey, I think you should be leaving with Isaac Guerrero. God forbid anything were to happen to these players. If that backup is sitting on waivers, everybody is going to be putting every dollar of fab they have on that guy because they know how much production the starter is going to get. So now that backup's going to slot right in and kind of pick up where they left off.
Yeah.
So if you can leave a draft with that player already, A, you're saving fab. And B, you're just saving your season because you can just slot this person right in, and you know what kind of opportunities they're going to get because you've seen it with that starter.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said, and it actually just kind of sparked like a little sub tip that I'm going to add to this one is, even if you don't have the running back handcuff, it's all right to take that backup and use that as trade leverage later on in the year. Now, what I'm not telling you to do is, like, if you see someone who is the Saquon Barkley manager and you have Will Shipley,
Mm,
don't just offer Will Shipley for
the other
a
name I
haul.
forgot.
You know what I mean? But if you go into that looking for something else, and then you just have this, leverage piece of like, and hey, listen, I have Will Shipley, and you can just corner off the, Philadelphia backfield with Will Shipley and Saquon Barkley. Maybe that's just enough to get, that trade over the hump and get it to go through, because obviously at the end of the day, what is Will Shipley to you if you don't have Saquon Barkley? Like, it's
Right.
not much unless Barkley goes down. But to that manager, Will Shipley means so much more because, obviously they lose Barkley, but they get the next best player in that system, and it's just an easy plug and play. So, use that to your advantage as well.
Yeah, two other names I thought of as well. Rico Dowdle. God
Oh,
forbid
yep.
anything were to happen with the Chuba Hubbard. Rico Dowdle's a big one because he's coming off 1,100 yard season with Dallas, and the other one, kind of a deeper one, but I'm only going to mention it because I took him on Tuesday. Woody Marks, with the Mixon injury, and we don't know
What Chubb has.
what the deal with Chubb, and I was going to say Damian Pierce, like he's had run, but hasn't produced the way he should, or at least was expected to. So now they got a rookie in Woody Marks. Who knows? That whole backfield situation is kind of a mess as of right now for Houston, but just a couple more names to pay attention to at the end of the draft.
Yeah, I like that one. All right, I'm here with tip number 8. This one I'm going to call "Be Smart About Rookies." So, listen, we all love rookies, and we know that they're kind of the new hotness, and we're so eager to draft rookies. But the thing is that with
Zach.
rookies, with rookies, they don't start off well. Rookies always start off slow, and then they come on strong in the second half of the year. And if you draft a rookie to be relied on as your running back one, Colin, or your wide receiver one, and things like that could be detrimental to your team. So I'm just going to give you just some statistics that kind of help prove that, where you're like, Meek, you're just blowing smoke up my butt. So in the case of wide receivers, on average, and this is between the years of 2015 and 2022, rookie wide receivers improved their fantasy production by about 28% in the second half of the season. So that's weeks 9 through 18 as opposed to weeks 1 through 8. So an example case that I can give is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Weeks 1 through 11, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 8.5 fantasy points per game. It was a wide receiver 70. He was awful. Then in weeks 12 to 18, through the fantasy playoffs, and this is where Amon-Ra became a legend. He averaged 25.2 points per game, and he was the wide
Unbelievable.
receiver 2 overall. You know what I mean? Like that. So that's just one example. Second example I have for you is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson in weeks 1 through 8 only averaged 11 points per game and was the wide receiver 44. Weeks 9 through 17 of his rookie year, 15.7 points per game, was the wide receiver 14. And running backs too. Running backs also start to tend to have a slow start. They increase their output by about 20 to 25% on average in the second half of the season. And some examples I have two for you with that. Jonathan Taylor in 2020, weeks 1 through 10, he was 11 points per game, the RB 25. And then weeks 11 through 17 had 23 points per game, it was the RB 3. And then Rashad White in 2022, weeks 1 through 8 was at 5.3 points per game. And then weeks 9 through 17, he had 11.8 points per game. So basically, what I'm trying to tell you is, don't draft a running back or a rookie running back or rookie wide receiver to be, your RB1 or 2. You want to make sure that if you can, and ADP works, you take them as your, 3 or 4, where they can sit on the bench, take some time, and then when the second half of the season comes on strong, you capitalize and you put them in your lineup. You can also do this the old fashioned way of, trading for that person, because, some people who have so much hype for these rookies, they're going to take them with their fourth or fifth, sixth round pick, expecting them to be immediate producers, and they're not, and they kind of get fed up and tired with them. And you can kind of swoop in, throw a deal out, and acquire that rookie, and you didn't have to take on any of that frustrating stuff in the first half of the season. You get all the good stuff in the second half, and potentially ride you to a championship.
Yeah, as much as I love this rookie class, like I'm not comfortable taking them as my one or two, for that position. Like you said, being a starter. Once I have three, or once they can be like my third option for that position, I'm comfortable with it. I think another good example is Brian Thomas last year.
Yes.
It's a slow start, even with Trevor Lawrence, and all of a sudden Mac Jones comes in and he ends up being a wide receiver 4 on the year. Like that kind of came out of nowhere. I think Malik Neighbors was an outlier last year. He was pretty much dominant throughout the year. There are going to be guys who can do that. But I think if you want to be as cautious and as safe as possible, still putting yourself in a position to win, if you're going to take a rookie, do it when he's your third wide receiver on your roster, or he's your third running back on your roster, to continue to set yourself up and have established guys being, in those starting positions. And then if they do break out, then you have a great roster piece already.
And I think that's a big thing too, Wu, is that like people draft these players and they're like, well, like Malik Neighbors was great all year long, or Brock Bowers was great all year long. Yes, those guys are outliers. Even someone like Justin Jefferson had a poor first
Oh
half of
yeah.
the season and came on strong in the second half of his rookie season. It doesn't happen often. So if you're using outlier people, to prove your argument of taking this rookie early, you're gonna more times than not lose out on that. Not to say it doesn't happen, and not to say like people like Tedoroa McMillan or Travion Henderson, don't immediately start strong and just take on the job for the rest of the year, but the data tells us that it's not a normal thing to happen.
And prime example of how you can get burned. You're privy to this. Marvin Harrison last year is going at
Yeah.
the end of the first round, beginning of the second. I was expecting a great year from Marvin Harrison, and he had a solid year. But when you're drafting him at the 1-2 turn, like you need him to be a top 10 guy, and he wasn't.
Exactly. And then you just have to put in the extra work to, you know, cover up that hole on in your roster.
Right.
So good one. Um, I'm gonna go next. I got two back to back. One. This one's an easy one. At the end of the day, it's just fantasy football, and you're here to have fun. Don't get caught up in the wins and losses. You know what I mean? We put sometimes we put a lot of mental and emotional stake into it. If we lose, listen. At the end of the day, we're just here to have fun. I do fantasy football for the camaraderie of my league mates. I know it sounds corny, but like just the fact that like perfect example, I know this has been come up multiple times in this episode, but like having this bonnet league is like some of the most fun that I've ever had, with these guys, just getting around and talking and reconnecting each year in person. That's also kind of another part of this. If you can pull it off every single year to have a live in-person
Have to
draft,
do it.
please do it. It's so like it just feels so rewarding to just sit around with the guys that you talk ball with all day long, and you just have a good time. So at the end of the day, it's just fantasy football. Have fun, you know what I mean, and you just do the best you can.
Yeah. And as one of the most competitive people of all time and who will get mad if I lost in a race up the stairs, yeah, you got to just have fun with it. Have fun with the guys, especially if you're in a league where a majority of the people. Definitely recommend the in-person drafts. Those are a lot of fun. I do it with some college friends as well. At this point, we got a lot of people living in different states, so it's the only time, the one time per year we can all see each other. So it's always a good time. So you just take advantage of having those memories.
Absolutely. And then Wu, why don't you round us up out with tip number 10?
Yeah, and I think this directly relates to both of us just on opposite sides of the coin. It's important to nail your draft, but you don't win the league, at the draft. I am somebody who loves my team, loved how I drafted. That doesn't mean I'm automatically getting that belt that's sitting behind Malik. And then on the flip side of this, Malik does not like his draft. It is unhappy with, some of the picks and how they shook out. Yes, maybe that does set up for a slow start, but that doesn't mean the season is over. Like the draft, yes, is very important. You want to set yourself up for at most success as possible, but a lot of things can happen. A lot of waiver wire pickups can happen. We saw Puka Nakua come off a waiver
Yeah.
wire 2 years ago. It wasn't
A
that
lot
long
of
ago. Like these things can happen.
a lot of
So
unsuspecting injuries too to like
exactly.
players on other people's
Somebody
teams.
big can go down. Like all of these things can happen. Last year, Christian McCaffrey is another good example of this. So many unknown things can happen. All we're doing is digitally drafting these players and digitally starting them on our lineups and hoping they play well that week. We have no input on what these guys do on the field, if they make it the whole season, all of these different factors, if they get benched, all these things. So yes, you want to draft as well as possible, but that does not mean you automatically win your league.
100%. Couldn't agree more. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Those are our top 10 redraft tips and tricks we have for you. Save this video for later, right before your fantasy draft, and give it a listen. I think it's going to be very helpful for you. And again, you don't have to follow all of them to a T. Follow some of them. Ignore some of them. That's totally fine. We're just here to kind of help you through the fantasy season. If there's any ones that you love to follow and want to share with us, please make sure you do so on our YouTube channel or even in our DMs on Instagram and TikTok. But just to kind of round out again, make sure you guys are following us on our socials: Twitter at Fourth and Fantasy Pod, Instagram and TikTok at Fourth and Fantasy. We're on YouTube, Fourth and Fantasy. Make sure you guys give us a like, follow on all of our socials, and leave a comment. This is the second episode of week 2. I think we've gone 2 in a
Yep.
week. So we're just hammering these out. I think next episode on Tuesday is going to be our personal My Guys episode, which I'm excited to talk about. And then I think the last episode before the regular season starts is going to be another mock draft, just to keep it fresh in everyone's mind. But make sure you're following us along. Any questions, please reach out to us via social media. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be seeing you.
See you.